So a night before the Rebbe became Rebbe, and this I heard directly from my father. He walked into Yechidus, he told me, and he told the Rebbe, "Was darf the Rebbe the Kopvetik?" It started to bother my father that the Rebbe is going to lose his private life. And he told the Rebbe that the Rebbe can sitzen in a winkel and learn. Everybody was telling Rebbe, become Rebbe, become Rebbe. And he was in Yechidus where the whole group,
right.
And my father signed the Ksavis Kashus. The Rebbe answered, "As ich will haben Chassidim, was wollen arbeiten, ist das Kedai."
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2025. My name is Benzi Afson, and I will be your host. Let's begin. All right, we are here live with Rabbi Tennenhaus, the one and only, and people who have been listening to this podcast will have had some introduction to him through Rabbi Pinion Druzier, but we're not going to rely on that. We'll give you your full due. And I just got to say, we're here in the library, which is off the side of the shul, and I think it can be labeled 770 South. It's but only in the good sense. A lot of energy, a little bit of toyu and chaos, just enough, but a lot of davening and a lot of learning, and a new hub of Yiddishkeit and Yiddish energy in South Florida. So thank you very much for having me just a week or so before Pesach.
My pleasure. I just want to welcome you.
Thank you.
To the hood. And this place was not always a little mini 770.
I know.
And the last few years, there's been incredible changes, and we're utilizing it to the max. And Baruch Hashem, we're seeing the dividends and the success of so many young couples that have moved into the neighborhood, and I'm blessed to be part of it.
So I want to go to the beginning of your story, and then we'll get and work our way back. But before I do, so I don't forget, was this something that you had in mind when you came to Florida? You know, a shlichus that is essentially a Lubavitch community. Is that something that you were entertaining, or something you were interested in?
When I went on shlichus, I was very naive. I'm probably still naive. Actually, every day I wake up, I feel it's my first day on shlichus.
Mamish.
Yeah. I feel every day. We're now closing in on 45 years.
45 years, kind of hard.
And Baruch Hashem, I wake up, I feel it's my first day on shlichus.
Huh.
So when I came down, number one, I didn't even realize I had to fundraise. I thought that you're becoming a rabbi of a shul, that the shul will pay you, and that was it. I had no idea that there was fundraising involved. I just was totally oblivious to this all.
You started off with a shul, or you didn't even have a
shul?
There
was a shul. There was a balabas,
Uh-huh.
and Dr. Schuster, Oliver Shalom, just passed away. He had a minyan in his house, and then before I moved down, he bought a house specially to be a shul. It's a mile away from here. And I didn't even think of fundraising. As far as where to go in the future, I was ready to go anywhere. I had many offers, including South Africa. And my wife, God bless her, she wanted to be near her family. And the Felix, like myself, originally from Montreal, they had moved to Florida back in 1978. We got married here in 1979. And my attitude was, I just wanted to go on shlichus. I wasn't picky, like where and what. You want to be near your mother? Okay, well, we'll move near your mother. That was my approach. But I had no vision as to Lubavitcher community, not Lubavitcher community. I was just ready to go on shlichus, and whatever, where the chips will fall, wherever it may land, and that was my attitude.
And the attitude has stayed that way after 45 years.
After 45 years, despite the incredible changes that have taken place.
All right, so I think that's, hopefully we're going to circle back to that and understand where that philosophy comes from. Because I think it's a bit easier said than done. In the sense that when you start off, yes, there's going to be a lot of innocence and a lot of openness to what might happen. You don't know yet what's going to happen. But as you start building, and this is true of every company or anything, where you start building and you start seeing hatzlacha, and you're like, okay, I need to solidify this and I need to focus on this. and suddenly you have to change, it becomes very hard. That's why a lot of businesses go out of business. And that's why, very often, to be blunt, a lot of shluchim don't like when their Chabad house turns into a Lubavitch shtibel, because I built up a Chabad house not for this, I built it up for that, right? And so it'll be very interesting to come back to see where you get this philosophy from. So let's go back to the beginning. How does the story of Rafi Tennenhaus begin?
On shlichus or in my life?
Life. I mean, you weren't born.
I wasn't born in 1980. I was born in 1957.
Okay, I wasn't prying, but okay. So you're about my father's age, a couple years older than him.
Correct.
I don't know if you know my father.
Yes.
Oh, you do know him? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was born actually in a little small town, tiny town in the maritime provinces of Canada. I don't know if you know of the maritime provinces.
No.
There's 4 provinces on the east of Quebec.
The east of Quebec.
There's 4 little provinces, and I was born in a town called Bathurst, New Brunswick.
Okay, I've heard of New Brunswick.
So Bathurst, New Brunswick was a town with maybe 10 Jewish families. Mm-hmm. My father, Oliver Sholem, moved there. He emigrated from Romania with his parents and his siblings in 1938.
Before the war.
Before the war, they got out of Romania. And he ended up, he had to support his parents. And a lot of his family members from the Dolphin family, his mother was Esther Dolphin, the oldest of 9 Dolphin children.
So
related to the Lubavitch Dolphins, but a distant relative. But it's Dolphin with an E. It's a big mishpach in Montreal, very big family.
I see.
And he went in 1940. He arrived in 1938. In 1940, he went to Bathurst, as did other family members. They went to New Brunswick to make parnassa in the shmata business, among other things.
It's a manufacturing town.
It was just an opening. I guess they figured that Montreal was already covered, so they went to a new province, and they went to different towns in that province. Many of my family members, one is Hatman, one is Sand, and...
Outs from Eden?
Yeah, but not like my father was.
Right.
My father was on a different level.
Saying were there communities there? There were shuls there?
Some had, some didn't. Bathurst, New Brunswick, where I was born, only had a minyan on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So when my father had yahrzeit, he would go into Montreal.
And how far is it from Montreal?
It's about 525 miles.
Okay, so you're talking about a serious 10-hour drive.
Yeah,
almost.
or usually he would take the train.
Yeah, but it's not 3 hours.
No. So my mother, before my father built a mikveh in Bathurst with the Rebbe's bracha, and the Rebbe gave financial assistance in the mid-1950s, before my father built a mikveh in that little town, my mother would either go to the mikveh in Moncton, New Brunswick, which is a big city in New Brunswick, so to speak,
right,
or to Montreal.
And how far is Moncton from?
I'm not sure the mileage, but it's a trip.
Also
it's
a trip.
It's a trip. It's not as long as Montreal. It's much closer.
Uh-huh.
So.
And what was your shlichus to Lubavitch? How did he end up at the
How did my father end up in Lubavitch? So he grew up in Vizhnitz,
right,
as a Vizhnitzer Chassid, and
he grew up in Romania as a Vizhnitzer Chassid.
Yes, his father was a Vizhnitzer Chassid,
right,
and that was the hub. He was in the town of Radovitz, which is near Chernovitz. So that area kept on changing between Ukraine and Romania. Okay. So now you always hear of Chernovitz, many stories. So that's the big city near Radovitz or Radouts is Chernovitz. So he told me that he heard about when he was young about the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. He knew of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, but he didn't know about Tanya until he came to Montreal. And when the bochur, the 9 shluchim of the Friediker Rebbe, were arriving, he especially came in from New Brunswick. He was already living in New Brunswick because his father had told him that there's a big simcha, yeshiva bochum. That's all they knew, that yeshiva bochum who were saved from the Holocaust. It wasn't called then the Holocaust. It was in 1941 when they arrived, that they were arriving in the train station. Right. They had come by boat from Shanghai. They landed in San Francisco, and then they took a train. They only got visas to Canada, so they had the train.
Oh, they came in 1941 already.
41, the 9 shluchim, from the Friediker Rebbe.
So they came before the rest of the yeshiva that was stuck in Shanghai.
Yeah, a
lot of them stayed till after the war, I think.
So
right?
not all of them came then, but they had visas. to go to Canada, not to the United States.
Right.
So it was a Thursday night that they landed, these 9. And my father especially came in from the Brunswick because it was like a simcha in the town that 9 boys from Europe through Shanghai were coming.
Right.
And all they heard was...
Also, a lot of them were Polish kids from the beginning.
Correct. And they weren't young boys.
No.
They weren't 18-year-olds.
No.
They were older boys. So what happened was at the train station...
Just for people that don't know, Rabbi Greenglass, right?
Rabbi Greenglass, Rabbi Kramer,
Right.
Rabbi Hendel.
Right.
So these were, very chashuv Yidden and learned people. So my father comes to the train station with the whole town, so to speak, showed up. And he sees from the train, coming off the train, there were about 20 boys with no beards.
No beards.
Because there was also Talmidim from Mir, the Mir Yeshiva boys. And then 9 boys came off. They looked totally unkempt. And they weren't young. And the president of the Montreal Jewish community announced publicly when he saw them, boys, tomorrow we're taking you to the barber shop. Because it was unheard of. The Rabbanim in Montreal, most of them didn't have beards.
Yeah, I mean, this was before the whole Chassidish community of Tosh and so on.
Correct. The Tosher Rebbe originally davened with Lubavitch when he first came to town. He didn't have his own minyan.
But this was before he came.
I'm just saying, when the Tosher Rebbe came, he davened in Lubavitch on Park Avenue.
Right.
So
Montreal is a much smaller community, is the point.
You're right, and it's also a very Chassidish community. Where I grew up in Montreal...
No, I'm saying back then it was a smaller community.
It was a much smaller community, but it was very traditional. But even this was totally... it shifted the paradigm as they used it. They didn't use that word then. But it made a big shift. Rabbi Hendel told me that a few months after he arrived, they found something that wasn't correct in the community mikveh, the women's mikveh, and they fixed it. So these bochur were big scholars. They were big Talmidei Chachamim, and they immediately got involved with the community.
How soon did they get married? I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but
again, I'm not a historian, so I can't tell you.
I'm not looking for exact.
But probably most of them got married in the 1940s. I would say.
I'm just. It's more like that. These guys they came as bochurim, and the sense of responsibility that they had, an agency, like ownership of what they were doing, like. So many times it's like, yeah, bochur is just whatever. We'll take him seriously when he gets married. You know what I mean?
The Friediker Rebbe put a lot of koiches. I know he sent Reb Shmuel Witten early on to help out. And there's letters from the Friediker Rebbe in the Igros Kodesh when they arrived. And then the second letter was to Rabbi Hendel about my grandfather. Because Rabbi Hendel had written to the Friediker Rebbe describing one of the people who greeted him when he arrived. And this made a roshim on my father. First of all, seeing the guys coming out with beards.
So this is Dovid Tennenhaus.
My Zayde.
Tennenhaus. Your father's father.
My father's father, Yisrael Tennenhaus. Okay. And he passed away young in the 40s, as did my grandmother. But they were close to the bochur. My Zayde and my Baba was very worldly. And the bochurim used to come to her with their issues. There was no psychiatrists or psychologists or therapists in yeshivas then.
Or wives.
Correct. So they knew that she knew worldly matters.
Right.
And they would come to discuss things with her, and she would give them advice.
I mean, these were also orphans, weren't they?
Correct.
Their parents, I mean, I don't know.
Again, I don't know if they knew particularly when...
Yeah, but they had a sense, I'm sure.
They had a sense, and the community... wanted them to go to the Laurentians when they first landed.
Laurentians? What's that?
The Laurentian Mountains. That's the mountains where Gan Yisrael is.
To recover?
To take a rest before the yeshiva started. So the Mirror boys took the community up on it, and they went to the Laurentians to vacate. And the Lubavitchers started the yeshiva Sunday. They came on Thursday night and Sunday. But what made the biggest roshim on my father was Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum. Because that Shabbos, my father stayed...
He was one of the bochurim?
Yes. So was Rabbi Yossel Weinberg, so was Rabbi Herschel Kotlarski. Eventually they moved to New York. So my father saw Rabbi Mendel Tenenbaum daven that Shabbos.
Which Tenenbaum is this?
Mendel Tenenbaum. He used to be the Baal Tekeya.
Oh, okay.
He was the principal.
So the Crownite's Tenenbaum family now.
Correct. So my father saw Mendel Tenenbaum davening that Shabbos, and he saw him davening till a few minutes before Shkia,
Right.
and then he saw him make Kiddush right before Shkia. And in his years, in 17 years living in Vishnitz territory, he never saw such a davening.
It's your father.
Correct, and that's what won him over. Literally, that's what moved him to get very close to the Lubavitch Chassidim and to the Rebbeim.
Okay, so fast forward a few years, he reaches out to the Rebbe about the mikveh. Just to
Well, fast forward, he had 2 Yechidasin with the Friediker Rebbe.
your father.
Yeah.
So so once he connected with these Lubavitchers, he
It was
traveled to
very
New
close
York.
to him. He would come to Kislev, let's say, to Montreal for upbringing.
But then he traveled to New York.
He traveled twice to the Friediker Rebbe. It wasn't easy after the war. It wasn't easy during the war, but after the war, in 1946, it was the first time he had Yechidus. But because he grew up in a small town in Romania, and he was living in a small town in Canada, Bathurst, and Brunswick, so when he came to 770, he saw a sign about the second floor that was the Friediker Rebbe's Yechidus room and house, and he had no idea how to use the elevator. He was clueless. So he was pacing up and down the lobby where the Zal is, because there was nobody around, and he didn't know how to get to the Friediker Rebbe.
Oh, so he had an appointment.
He had an Yechidus, it was arranged,
he didn't know
but
to
he
get up.
didn't know how to go up the elevator. And
That's a deep metaphor over there. Deep
so
metaphor.
wait, it gets better. So there was a younger man in the Zal then. It was probably after Seder.
Right.
There was a younger man with a gray hat and a blue suit in the Zal, and he saw that someone was pacing up and down the corridor. So this younger man asked my father if he could help him, like, what's going on? So my father told him that he has a Yechidus with the Rebbe, and he doesn't know how to go to use the elevator. So this younger man was the Ramash. My father didn't know who he was. And the Ramash, as the Rebbe was known then, tells my father, who was a linguist, and he spoke 7 languages fluently, my father, he tells my father in a very heavily accented Russian accent, Kvietch Kniepel. If you listen to the Fabrengens in the early years, you'll hear that the Rebbe's Yiddish was more heavily accented with the Russian,
so a Russian accented Yiddish.
Russian accented Yiddish, and my father did not understand what the Rebbe was saying, and he kept on repeating, Kvietch Kniepel, Kvietch Kniepel. He was clueless. So the Rebbe took my father upstairs and brought him into Yechidus. So that was the first time he met the Rebbe. And then he had a second Yechidus, and that was also a very interesting Yechidus with the Friediker Rebbe. It had to do with the shliach. And then
Did he describe the Friediker Rebbe to you?
Very much. He said the first time he walked in, that time, he wanted to run out.
Mamish.
The Friediker Rebbe's eyes just went straight through him. He felt like running away.
I heard that from someone else also. But it's so interesting because the pictures of Friediker Rebbe is so, like when he poses for pictures, is much more like smiling and like a Zayda almost.
But when my father told me the first time he walked in, he felt like running out because there was like 2 darts going through him. And it was hard for him to stay in. That's how overwhelming it was.
And they had a conversation?
They had a conversation. I don't know much about the first Yechidus, but at that time already, my father's family was already supporting the Lubavitch Yeshiva.
In Montreal?
Correct. And there was already correspondence my father already had from the Friediker Rebbe before he went to see him.
Right.
He already had correspondence. He had correspondence with my Baba and Zayda, the Friediker Rebbe. And my father told me he could not understand without Rabbi Simpson. He couldn't understand. It wasn't audible for my father, who didn't know the Friediker Rebbe's difficulty in speaking. He couldn't pick up what the Friediker Rebbe was saying.
There were very few people that could, right?
Correct. So he had to hear it from the secretary. So I don't know much what went on, but obviously I know that my great uncles, they helped publish the Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Hey. They lost a brother, and Rabbi Greenglass was very involved with them donating the publication of Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Hey. So there's letters in the Igros Kodesh from the Rebbe, who was also obviously very involved with Kahas and with the Sforim. So the name and the family was a very familiar name to the Friediker Rebbe. From then on, after the first Yechidus, the Friediker Rebbe, when he wrote to my father, wrote Yedidi as a title. Before that, he didn't. But only after they met, the Rebbe didn't use that term generally to people in titles. But after that, your first Yechidus, second Yechidus, which I tell...
What do you chalk that up to? Because someone else mentioned that to me.
I think the Rebbe, I know, again, this is my own analysis.
Yes, of course.
We always say that the Rebbe was Malchus. I mean, the Rebbe was just on a different level as far as the Rebbe's demeanor was much more Malchus than any of the Rebbeim. And perhaps that's why the terms of endearment were not that common when the Rebbe addressed someone. That's the way we just spoke about it in Yeshiva.
This week's episode is brought to you by This World is a Garden, a new film and concert production by Yuvla Media. Based on the Rebbe's first talk, Basi Legani, the production tells the story of the Chabad vision lasting over 300 years, to see this world as God sees it, as His garden. Combining beautiful cinematography with a live performance of a string quartet, This World is a Garden is a meditation on hope and holding on to a vision as time passes by. This production is now available to be shown at your Chabad house and community. Share the message and vision of Basi Legani with your community in a way you never have before. For more information, please visit thisworldisagarden.com. Yeah, there is something about that. Not to get too carried away with this digression, but I was reading recently the memoirs of my grandfather Afton, Mayor Afton, and he remembered he's writing about the last upbringing, the last Simchas Torah, I think, the Friediker Rebbe had with the bochurim in Russia before he was exiled. So after Beis Tammuz, he had a few months to pack up and leave, or maybe it was already outside of Russia. I don't remember, but it was the last time that he was seeing these bochurim, and he says like these lines were like, I would call you my brothers, but because I was a single child and I never had brothers, I can't call you brothers. I can call you Reim instead. Like you can see this. He was a Rebbe then already. Like, and they were going through. He was also in a very exalted space of that comes from the trials and tribulations that he was suffering, and you can see him trying to articulate a closeness. And it's like, yeah, the Rebbe would never speak that way. Like. I don't know. It's just
it was a different style. You could see in the letters. It's a different style. But we always used to say that it was Malchus. That the Rebbe is
right.
The Dor Shvi, and it's Malchus, and that's how we just understood it.
Yeah, the Rebbeim were different people. All of them dealt with things differently. They all had different. I mean, to put it grub, they all had different personalities and different dispositions. It's just interesting. Anyway, sorry to.
So my father was not at the Levaya of the Friediker Rebbe. He couldn't make it.
Right.
I guess by the time he heard the news, it wasn't shliach to make it. But
he already considered himself a Lubavitcher at that point.
Already, correct. He already had shlichus from the Friediker Rebbe.
Right. Specific
shlichus what to do in Brunswick.
Was he told to stay there? Was there ever a time where he's like, okay, I could move back to Montreal?
In 1960, when my oldest brother, Oliver Sholem, was 10 years old, and the rest of us were 7, 5, 3. I was 3. So because of chinuch, he asked the Rebbe for permission to leave because he was doing shlichus, but he wasn't officially a shliach.
Right.
And the Rebbe told him, just stay for the Yom Neroim, and then after the Yom Neroim you could go. And then he took on a whole new career when he came to Montreal.
Oh, so you did end up moving to Montreal.
We ended up moving to Montreal in 1960 when I was 3. And like I said, my father was not at the Levaya, but he was at the first upbringing of the Rebbe the next year, the Yud Aleph Shvat, early Yud Aleph Shvat, Tafshin Yud Aleph. So he came in from the Brunswick, and the night before that upbringing, which was early Yud Shvat, so it's mentioned in Yemei Bereshis, the way that a lot of the Montreal Chassidim had Yechidus that night, and there was actually a general Yechidus. Montreal was from the leaders of the Ksavis Kashrus and pushing that the Rebbe should become Rebbe.
And your father was involved in all of this?
He wasn't so much involved in the Ksavis Kashrus, but he was involved in hoping that the Rebbe would become Rebbe. But after the Rebbe sort of told the Montreal group to leave when they were telling him to become Rebbe, many of them had personal yichidus, including my father. So the night before the Rebbe became Rebbe, and this I heard directly from my father, and he didn't talk too much. He didn't tell me many stories of his interactions with the Rebbe because he didn't think it was a big deal. Right. It was just a different relationship.
Right.
So he walked into yichidus, he told me, and he told the Rebbe, "Vos darf the Rebbe the Kopvetik." It started to bother my father that the Rebbe is going to lose his private life. And he told the Rebbe that the Rebbe can sitzen in a winkel and learn. And the moment he becomes Rebbe, that he won't have a second to himself and he won't have a private life.
So he didn't want him to be Rebbe?
He wanted him to become Rebbe. He just expressed that he had pain, what the Rebbe is going to be going through.
Huh. And what did the Rebbe say?
It was published in Chabad after my father passed away, and a lot of people were very interested in this because it was a whole different hergish that my father was expressing. Everybody was telling Rebbe, become Rebbe, become Rebbe. And he was in Yechidus where the whole group, and my father signed the Ksavis Kashrus.
And what did the Rebbe say?
The Rebbe answered, "As ich will haben Chassidim, was wollen arbeiten, is das kedai." If I have Chassidim who will work, it'll be worth it.
Wow.
So unlike the others who he was telling them no, 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 he alluded to, which the next night he spoke about at the Verbrengen. And from day one, my father was a soldier in the Rebbe's army because he was very involved with the Mivtzoyim and any campaign that the Rebbe started.
Can you unpack that a little bit? Can you unpack that story a little bit? I think it's a very important story because it's a moving story, right? But there's I think what's so, you said people were surprised by it. I think because the idea of a chassid like worrying about the Rebbe, right? Especially maybe later on when the Rebbe's health, and the Rebbe, someone else needed to. But at that time where the Rebbe's fully in control and you're going to worry about him, verbisto, and if anything, you have to push him like the other people. So I think that's already surprising. But it, like you said, it's reverse. Like the Chassidim who were pushing the Rebbe to be Rebbe, the Rebbe's saying like, because in a way it makes sense. You're telling me what I need to do. Well, what about what you need to do? Like, what are you telling me what I need to do? Mind your own business, right? And here where you're like, you're concerned about me, then like there's a more healthy relationship almost where if you're concerned about me, then I can trust you in return, something like that. What do you see in that story?
My father had a lot of Avos Yisrael, so he just expressed the human aspect that he was concerned with.
But why do you think the Rebbe reacted so much more openly to his gesture than like you said the other ones? He was more defensive or more.
I can't answer that. I can't answer that.
You haven't thought about it?
No, I never thought of it.
Okay, fair.
But it's interesting because
there seems to be something about. Okay, it seems to be that like there's something sometimes gets forgotten in the whole kind of hurrah of Chassidishkeit and Iskashrus, like basic, almost like, I don't know if the word's menschlichkeit, but basic, like there's another person on the other side of the desk here, right? And if you're going to begin with, forget about that I'm a person too, then we can't work together, right? And like there's something like you almost see like the Rebbe with like American Chassidim or even not Chassidim. There's like a certain like almost ease that he has with people that are down to earth and straightforward and aren't caught up in the, you know what I'm saying?
Now, I'll fast forward just to one little something. When I first went out of town to yeshiva, which I was 16, I went to Morristown.
From Montreal.
That was the first time I went out of town to yeshiva. A few months later, I was home, and I saw my father was in the middle of writing a letter to the Rebbe. Mm-hmm. And it caught my eye the way he addressed it. It just caught my eye. And I didn't look at the letter. I just saw the way, and I said something to my father. I was probably pretty chutzpahdik as a kid. He was writing in Yiddish, and he addressed it. He didn't write it Kvei Kedushas Admor Shlita. He wrote Teire und Liebe Rebbe Shlita.
Huh. How about? Oh, wow.
And I said, it's not the way you're supposed to write.
Right.
And,
It's not formal.
and he looked up at me with what I call the Archie Bunker look. I don't know if you know who Archie Bunker was. So Tovei Alecha Bracha if you don't know.
No,
but,
and I know some other nonsense from later
all right,
on.
but that look, he gave me a look like, like mix out. Like, do you know my relationship with the Rebbe?
Right.
And I backed off. But it was he had that certain human relationship with the Rebbe. He sent Mayor Plotkin of Montreal, he should live and be well, he told me that in the 1950s, before people celebrated Yud Nissen, he said, my father used to send the Rebbe a birthday card for Yud Nissen with a note on it.
Uh-huh.
And he said he also used to send anniversary cards to the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin. So it was a little bit different, his relationship, to the point, and that's the one which most people are amazed, and those who remembered it told me it was phenomenal. In Tafshin Yud Beis, Simchas Torah was upstairs, Hakafis,
Right.
and there was a table of what they called the Montrealers, even though my father was from the Brunswick, but he identified with the Montrealers.
So he would come in for Tishrei.
He would come in for Simchas Torah.
Simchas Torah.
And the table collapsed upstairs. And when everybody was getting up, the Rebbe did not dance the first couple of years with the Rashag. He danced with older Chassidim. So
Who?
I can't say. Those in the know will tell you who it was. I can't say, but it was with older Chassidim.
Okay.
But when my father got up from the pile, there was an arm on my father's shoulder. And it was the Rebbe's arm. And my father put his arm back on the Rebbe. He grew up in Visionitz. He didn't have any qualms. He didn't have any doubt what to do.
These stories don't bother me. I love these stories.
So they danced. It was the niggin of K'mayfus Yisi before it became a song of K'mayfus Yisi. It was just the tune.
Yeah.
Yeah. 45 minutes, one-on-one, they danced with the
Really?
Rebbe. 45 minutes. And they published this in Kfar Chabad when my father...
Just your father and the Rebbe?
Just the father and the Rebbe, and they each had a
So wait,
Sefer Torah.
Okay, so this story's fascinating. But we haven't yet... What did your father look like? He had a full beard at this point?
He had a beard. He used to trim it a little bit, but he had a beard. He started growing a beard after his mother passed away.
A kapata? He was wearing a kapata?
He didn't wear a kapata. No, a gartel, but he never put on a kapata.
So a post-war Chassidish, like a lot of a Veltische post-war... Like you saw them all over the place in Borough Park. A lot of them did shave, didn't shave, but a small black hat on Shabbos. Maybe.
Yeah, and he had a black hat always. He always wore a black hat.
A small black hat, a regular suit, and a gartel.
Always with a gartel, always with a yarmulke. Even in the Goyish town, town where he owned a few businesses, there was a store. The market was Saturday was the busiest day of business.
Right.
He always closed the store.
No, there were a lot of these people like this. Beryl Weiss was like this for many years.
Yeah, but I'm talking about here in a little Goyish town. So in the winter, Shabbos ends very early.
Right.
And he used to open the store like a half hour after Shabbos. And he would tell the customers that look in the sky, and when you see 3 stars, you'll know I'll soon be there.
Right.
So I always wanted to make a picture or a children's book of a Goyish town, Main Street. His store was on Main Street. And here you have Goyim looking up to see when David is going to be coming because the Sabbath will be over.
What's the urgency to buy Shmatas on Motzei Shabbos?
Because people came in from other cities. It was a market day. Saturday was the busiest retail day in the town.
So he lost out.
He lost out. He didn't care.
It was real parnassa that he was losing out on.
He was losing out, but he would open up in the winter. He would open up a half hour after Shabbos.
Yeah,
and the Goyim would be looking in the sky.
How early is that? That's 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, 5 in the evening, or 5:30, whatever it was. But I always would like to see a drawing of how they would be looking up.
Well, today with ChatGPT, it's a few minutes on the internet. Ask one of your grandkids.
When he graduated, he had a number of degrees. When he graduated in the Brunswick, so a few of his aunts, they all came to the graduation. He was the first one to have an education in his family, in the Dolphin family. So they all came. There was a few hundred people, but it was a Catholic.
I thought your grandfather lived in Montreal.
Grandfather lived in Montreal. I don't know if they were still alive, but when he graduated in the 40s...
Oh, so he was already married. He graduated.
No, he got married in 49.
So he went as a single to New Brunswick?
He was a single, yes.
I thought you went with your mother to...
No.
He went...
He was single.
For many years he lived
by himself.
And
the second Yechidus had to do with the shliach.
His shliach.
With the Friediker Rebbe had to do with his shliach.
His shliach. Okay, so he went to New Brunswick by himself.
By himself. And he had a uncle who had hired him, and then he went on his own.
So he was there all alone, a frum Yid,
All alone from him, and he
middle of
learned.
nowhere,
He used
Canada.
to sit with a Gemara in his store,
Middle of nowhere, Canada.
middle of nowhere,
Wow.
middle of nowhere.
It's yeah.
And he was very close to the shluchim and to the anash in Montreal.
Yeah, but
He would come in for special occasions.
Yeah, but in those days, I mean, even today, when you're living in a different city and you have access with the phone and internet, you're still by yourself, and physically,
but let's say the family every Sunday, because they had different cities in the Brunswick, they would have a barbecue, and they would get from Glatz in Montreal every Thursday. The train would bring the meat and the kosher food.
Shabbos he spent by himself.
Spent by himself.
Shabbos
Correct.
he spent by himself, and the week he spent by himself. Wow.
But both my parents were intellectuals. They were big readers. My father learned a lot, so they were, always had what to do.
No, I'm not having a chvanis for.
No, I'm just saying it was just a different way of life.
But it's also like the idea of frumkeit that is like individual and not dependent on in Lubavitch we kind of take for granted with the idea of shlichus, right? But even shlichus, it's like you're going married most of the time and you're building a community. Here's the idea, like this has a lot. This reminds me a lot of the stories in Russia of the Kretschmer, of these people living by themselves in the middle of nowhere. From Yidden.
So when he graduated, one of my great aunts, his aunt, told him, they called him Duchu. David was Duchu. They said, Duchu, the Galach gives you the diploma because it was a Catholic university.
Right.
It's not nice that you wear your yarmulke when you get your diploma. Maybe when the Galach gives you the yarmulke, you shouldn't be wearing your yarmulke. My father never took off his yarmulke. Right. So he said he's not going to take off his yarmulke. They all were in the audience. Right. It's a few hundred people at the graduation. They call him up, and the Galach looks at my father and he says, "We should all learn from Dovid Tennenhaus to be proud of your faith, and not to." And then all the aunts were clapping, so happy. So that was his teva. He didn't go, he went against the tide.
Right, but going back to that relationship with the Rebbe, it's for sure something that one notices with these with different. There is a pattern there of this kind of dynamic of he respects Rebbe tremendously. It's not that he is mizalzel or has less derech eretz for the Rebbe than a strong mekusher dershvi bochur, like you said, the story of you confronting him. But it reminds me a lot of Rabbi Zelikson was talking about his father, Dr. Zelikson, and the way Dr. Zelikson interacted with the Rebbe, and there's a lot there. It seems like there are some similarities there, a very personal relationship with a massive amount of respect, like infinite respect almost. With Dr. Zelikson, they were involved in stories that are incomprehensible. Like nobody really knows what was going on there. But then, then comes the next generation, and you're being mechunach in yeshivas, and in your mind to write to the Rebbe, my liber
Rebbe Shlita, and I was like, I'm just came out of yeshiva for a few months.
What are you,
I'm an expert in how you're supposed to address the Rebbe, and I said, how do you write the Rebbe? You're supposed to write Kvei Kedushas Admor Shlita.
But you didn't change your mind afterwards.
Did I change my mind how I should write, or how my father should write?
No, how you should write.
No, I didn't change my mind how I should write, but I wasn't going to mix into how my father would write.
Right. So, like it's always that way. It seems where on one hand these people had this kind of connection, but then the next generation doesn't. Right. Like I remember a similar kind of episode that I saw. I may have said on the podcast before, where I was once at a meeting of shluchim in Philadelphia back in the day. And the people were talking about, things that they heard the Rebbe said and whatever. And my Zayda walked in, Rabbi Shem Tov, and they were asking him about it. Does he know about the story? Does he know about the story? Like, what does he think about it? He said, look, in my days, we didn't speak so much about the Rebbe. We spoke to the Rebbe. Right? And also similarly, like, I would drive my grandfather around a lot, and I drove him a lot of times to the oil because my grandfather went to the oil multiple times a week. And I, as a bochur also, I didn't understand. I was taught the oil something. You and you don't just go in and you need a whole day. It's a whole thing, right? And my grandfather would come to the oil, and sit down and write a zettel, I don't know, sometimes 10 pages long. And sometimes he was taking phone calls in the middle because he has a meisid that's, it wasn't personal stuff. It was, everybody that knew my grandfather knew his phone was never off, besides for when he walked into the oil or other, but, to me it was like, wait 1 second, they teach me, this is not,
It's a different generation.
yeah. So how do you see that? Like, do you feel that like you wish you could be that maybe your father had a point, maybe he was right, or is it that each generation has its?
It was his relationship. He wasn't a tomim.
Right.
He had to go to work right away.
Okay, interesting.
So his brother was, and then he made Aliyah. He went to Eretz Yisrael in 1948. But it's different when you grow up in Vishnitz and you weren't learning in Tomchei Tamimim, and even if you had a big connection to the Rebbe and love for the Rebbe, but it was still a different relationship. One day, one of the Yechidisin that my father had, he came in. One day, in the mid-1950s, my father came in and he put down his zettel, and the Rebbe looked at him and says, "Guckst du a bissl more scheurer? Lass mir reden in Latin. Let's talk Latin." Now, my father, one of the subjects he taught was Latin.
Oh, your father was a teacher also?
He was when he came to Montreal.
I see.
So he was like the director at the beginning of the Beis Yankov High School secular studies.
I see.
So he taught Latin, math, French, and history. So when he came to the Rebbe knew all, because he used to discuss with the Rebbe when he was taking his exams and whatever. So the Rebbe said, "Let's talk Latin." So they spoke for 40 minutes in Latin. Now, when I was sitting shiva for my father, the colleagues of his, then he was already teaching in public school.
When was this? When did your father pass away?
9 months before Gimel Tammuz, Gimel Tishrei, Tofshin and Dalet. So when I was sitting shiva for my father, his colleagues came over to me and they said, "You should know that your father was the only professor in Montreal who spoke Latin as a language. Years ago it was common, maybe in the Vatican, some of them knew." He says nobody could speak it as a language. Right. Your father spoke it as a language. Huh. So in the mid-1950s, he once walked in and the Rebbe said, "Guckst du a bissl mehr scheurer, lass mir reden in Latin." And they spoke for 40 minutes in Latin.
About what?
I don't know. All I know is that the Rebbe was also fluent in Latin. And I had read a few years ago the Sefer HaToldos of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash was fluent in Latin. It seems all the Rebbeim were.
And your father enjoyed speak. Is it a thing that people like that?
For some
speak
reason,
Latin, they enjoy.
My father enjoyed it. He enjoyed. He taught French, and he enjoyed, if you were a Parisian, to speak the French way from Paris,
right,
or the gutter Quebecois. Quebec, it's a total different.
He could speak both.
He could do both. He could switch it, depending who he was speaking to.
No, they say Latin's a very enjoyable language. A lot of the pretentious universities have in their valedictorian addresses at the end of the year, they have one Latin address, and when you listen to it, it's a beautiful.
So they used to teach in all the high schools Latin, but they dropped it.
Yeah.
And then I only just found out a few years ago that when he was teaching in Beis Yankov, Friday he taught Latin. In the middle of the Latin class, he would teach Chassidus. And he had a lot of hayros from the Rebbe what to do in Beis Yankov, because he was like the living example of a chassid in the Beis Yankov school. So he had a lot of hashpah on the girls of the Beis Yankov. Even though he was teaching secular subjects, but he would smuggle in chassidus and a story of a Rebbe. He would get that in during his.
Did he at some point feel a need to go full Lubavitcher in the sense of kapata and beard or whatever?
Let's put it this way. He used to wear kittel originally when I was a little kid for Pesach, but then he took it off. We were we would work on him a little bit, but he wouldn't. We weren't busy with the.
He never felt a need to He was himself to the end.
He was himself to the end.
All right, I don't want to make it all about your father, although it's fascinating. I love these kind of stories. But so let's move along to to what happens next. So you end up in yeshiva. You grew up in this small town. Eventually, your parents moved to Montreal.
Yeah, I was still 3, so I have a few little memories,
right.
but very
so it didn't
few.
affect you so much to
Not
grow
too
up
much,
in a small town. So you grew up in Montreal. But you're being brought up as a Lubavitcher.
Correct.
Okay. Well, what's it like to go up to Montreal in those days?
Montreal. So we actually never moved to where the yeshiva was. So we would, there was a Lubavitcher Minyan, the original Lubavitcher Minyan, which at one time where the yeshiva was on Park Avenue, then it moved to Gene Mance. That's, near Uchama. But those who know Montreal will know. So that, like, Gene Mance had a lot of Chassidish shtiblach. And we used to rent from the Belzer Girls' School for Shabbos to have the minyan.
Why did your parents move there? Was there or just
no?
They
Then
found the
that's
house?
where everyone lived before Rabbi Kramer built the new yeshiva. Everyone was living there in the older neighborhood. We never moved.
I see.
And eventually we moved to Côte St. Luc, which we jumped over Snowden because my father was transferred to Wager High School, where it was a public school with 95% Jewish kids. So and he wasn't driving a car, and for him to take the bus was too much.
Right.
So I was already in 1972, a year before I went to Morristown.
Right.
So I didn't live there for too long. So growing up in Montreal, it was I was grade one of the Lubavitch Yeshiva when the new building. That was I think it was 1962, 63 when they opened, and we had 25 kids in our class. None of us had grandparents. Most of them were children of survivors.
Right.
And there was maybe 3 Lubavitcher boys in my class. It wasn't like it was this.
Right.
The yeshiva was attracting kids from all different backgrounds.
Was it the only from school at the time?
There was another yeshiva, the Merkas HaTorah.
Was it
another
the
yeshiva.
Litvish?
That was the Litvish.
Okay.
So Rabbi Hirschman was more involved with that one at first, but eventually he shifted over to Lubavitch.
Right.
And my father had a part of that, but we don't want to make this about my father, so I don't want to.
I don't mind, but I don't want to. I want to give you the opportunity to move forward with the story. This was basically a school of mainly Chassidish kids.
Not necessarily Chassidish kids.
Not even Chassidish.
Or kids who the parents came from backgrounds in Eastern Europe.
So why did they come to Lubavitch and not the Litvish school?
Some chose just. Rabbi Kramer was very outgoing. He knew the whole town knew him.
Right.
They all respected him, and I guess they made a choice whether to go with the Chassidish or the Litvish. You have to remember, somebody once wrote a book. They said 2/3 of Eastern European Jewry was connected to Chassidim.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of Litvish are really Chassidish.
Yeah, a lot of them. So for whatever reason, and the Lubavitch Yeshiva had a new building. Merkas HaTorah didn't. Right. So it was, it had its advantages.
My point is more that the lines were quite blurred. It wasn't like Chassidish here, Litvish here, Lubavitch here, Lubavitch not here.
We knew that this one was the not Lubavitch. This one was the Lubavitch.
But the student body.
But we knew the kids. We knew all the kids.
Right,
We knew it was a small enough town that we knew the kids from both schools. When Merkas HaTorah closed, when I was in grade 11, I went to high school. I chose to go to high school. So
it's before
Morristown. Before Morristown. So I had 1 year Beis Medrash in Montreal while I was in grade 11. Montreal, you finish in grade 11. So when Merkas HaTorah closed, the Litvish Yeshiva closed, there was 1 year before the Yeshiva Gedola opened, which was the next Litvish Yeshiva to open. And then 9 boys from Merkas came to the Yeshiva for grade 11. Mm-hmm. So it was, a small town in many ways. But Rabbi Hirschman already started with the yeshiva probably in 1965.
And who were your teachers that stand out?
I mean, I could tell you my grade 1 Malamed was...
No, but I'm saying, but it stands out.
Dovid Katz.
Any personalities that stand out to Montreal back then?
Everyone was a personality.
Okay.
Many of them smoked in class.
That wasn't
many of them hit us.
Yeah, but that's what everybody did
back
then.
That was what it was. And but I have very good memories from the yeshiva.
Homesick for Lubavitch is brought to you by Yuvla Media, a boutique video production company servicing the Chabad and Jewish community. Since opening 10 years ago, Yuvla Media has pushed the boundaries of artistic and thoughtful storytelling in the community, with an insistence on there always being a memorable story as well as a beautiful and striking visual image that we believe is second to none. Over the years, we have worked with Chabad organizations around the country, as well as large organizations like Boni Olam, Torah Masorah, and Atzalathon, guided by the belief that your story is absolutely worth telling with depth and creativity. If you are looking to tell your story with a video, please reach out to us at hello@yuvlamedia.com. Again, that is hello@yuvlamedia.com. A link can be found in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast. Were you going in with your father to 770 through these years?
Occasionally. First time that I remember was in 1963. Chavdalet, Rosh Hashanah Chavdalet.
Oh, you went for Rosh Hashanah.
I did for Rosh Hashanah, and I met not only the Rebbe, and I had a little interaction with the Rebbe by Keshel Bracha, but I got a bracha. It was a year before Rebbe Tzimchana, the Rebbe's mother, passed away.
Right.
So Rebbe Tzimchana was different than Rebbe Tzimchana. She was a public Rebbe.
Yeah, she was more open. Yeah.
She was open. She had her place to daven in 770. She had a place by Verbrengens.
Right.
And after davening, she would often stand outside. People would greet her and wish her a good Shabbos or a good Yontif, whatever it was. So my father took me and my brother over to Rebbe Tzimchana. And like I told you, he wasn't shy.
He knew her?
He knew her. And he said to her, "Dozayin Mainazin." He wished her a good year and a good Shabbos, whatever it was. It was a 3-day Yontif. Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday. And he said, "Ich will as the Rebbe soll benchen Mainazin." And Rebbe Tzimchana gave us the Yivarechacha. She said the two psukim. Yeah. She smiled and she said the whole Yivarechacha.
Oh, yeah, it was a very interesting dynamic. You had the Rebbe's wife, who was very private. You had Rebbe Tzimchana. And then this is also while Rebbe Tzimchana is still alive, no?
Correct.
But she was also very private.
My father knew her also. My father told me that people would go to her for brachas.
Oh, they would, okay.
Back maybe in the 40s.
Right.
I can't tell you for sure what happened after that. But
interesting.
This was, and then when she passed away, the next year, my father flew in for the Levaya, for Rebbe Tzimchana's Levaya.
Coming in for Rosh Hashanah is something that Chassidim in general do? Like a vision sir does that?
You know how it worked in Montreal? I can tell you how it worked in Montreal. If you went once a year to the Rebbe, it was your Shvat.
Right.
That's how it was. The buses would leave.
Right. That's what I'm trying to understand why your father thought about coming for.
For whatever reason, he had the opportunity and he took us, and it was something that I'll never forget. I was 6 years old. I was closing in on 7, and I remember many, many aspects of that Yontif.
And he took you into Yechidus as well?
In the Keshel Bracha.
Keshel Bracha.
Keshel Bracha.
And for your Bar Mitzvah, he brought you in for Yechidus?
Yechidus, it was right after Yud HaGodel,
right?
1970. My father could not be there. They would not let a 12-year-old, because it was a few weeks before my Bar Mitzvah. 12-year-old couldn't go in by himself to Yechidus.
You were there?
Yeah.
Oh, you came for your Shvat?
Yeah, we always used to come for Yud Shvat.
But your father didn't come?
He didn't come. I came with the school, the class. Everyone would come in. So Rabbi Kramer brought me into Yechidus.
Ah, okay.
And so the first part of the Rabbi Kramer's Yechidus was my Yechidus for my Bar Mitzvah. The Rebbe asked me, "Du sagst etwas von der Bar Mitzvah?"
I heard you a little
so
bit.
I said, yeah, the mime. I was very hoarse. I always used to get hoarse, especially after a New York trip.
All right.
So they took us all over in New York. So I said, yeah, the mime. I was holding the desk. And Rebbe said,
why were you holding the desk?
I was just like...
People would stand so close?
I was that close. I was just holding onto the desk. So the Rebbe said, let me hand the mimer. So I said the first 4 paragraphs of the mimer.
Right.
And then the Rebbe asked me questions at the end of the mimer. And I was answering not just my answers, but my brother taught me the mimer with some of his biurim. And I was answering the Rebbe. And Kramer said I did very well. All I know is that I just kept on talking.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you weren't so nispal yet?
No, I was very overwhelmed. I had then Yechidus 5 years in a row for my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Would you have been comfortable speaking that long when you were older?
No.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I never spoke. That was the only time I spoke in Yechidus.
Huh.
By my bar mitzvah. From then on, I never said a word.
Why? Because you weren't comfortable, or because you weren't given the opportunity?
I was full of fear in Yechidus. Very full of
fear.
So
what changed between 12 and 13 years old, or 13 and 14 years old?
Probably I was younger, and the Rebbe asked me to say the mimer, so I said it, but if let's say...
You're probably also prepared. People knew that you had to say mimer or pilpul, right? That was a custom, I think. Probably.
The Rebbe would often... I knew I might get tested, but I wasn't fearful. I wasn't fearful, but I do know that in later Yechidusin, you would write a zettel, and sometimes the Rebbe would not address something that you wrote.
Right.
But if the Rebbe wouldn't address something that I wrote, I would never have the chutzpah to ask it if the Rebbe didn't. And some
people did? You've heard that people did?
I'm sure they did. But I know that I would never, if I wrote something that's settled and the Rebbe didn't address it, I wouldn't. But I did notice.
But we're talking between 13 and 14. What happened? Was it something that they taught you in yeshiva?
No, because when I turned 14, the Rebbe didn't ask me to say anything.
Uh-huh.
So it was just It was just, and as I was getting older, I guess I was learning more Chassidus. You start learning
Right.
Chassidus and this, and you start understanding more. And I was always extremely, extremely quiet. Even, like I always say now, if I would take people to dollars, because I used to take people for dollars, Balabatim. So now I would say things that I couldn't say in my younger years. I would be less shy.
Once you were shliach.
Even when I was a shliach, I was extremely shy when I took Balabatim to the Rebbe.
You're saying now if you went to the Rebbe, you would be less shy?
I think I would be less shy. I think
interesting.
with age, you mellow and you... For example, I'll just give one example.
Very, very interesting.
There was a lady who used to make our cholent. She was the last... Her and her husband were the last couple married by the Satmar Rav in the town of Satmar. The next day he took the train, the Kastner train.
Right.
So I took them to the Rebbe for dollars.
Oh, they were here in Florida.
Yeah, they were here in Florida. They helped us a lot, and I introduced them, but I couldn't tell the Rebbe she makes the cholent. I was too shy to say that.
Shy or scared? I'm not scared. Shy or yira. What, like, scared is a little bit of a harsh word.
I just felt that it doesn't behoove me to go into such...
So are you a shy guy in general? You're a shliach in Florida, making events in front at the basketball games.
I'm not shy, but it was... I just felt the Rebbe's time. I just felt that I couldn't...
So it's a deep respect for the Rebbe. It's not shy.
But it was a little bit timid.
Timid.
And I think as you get older, you get less timid. So I always say to myself, now I would tell the Rebbe that she makes the cholent, but then I couldn't tell it. I just couldn't get the words out of my mouth. The Rebbe gave her like $13.
Is it less timid, or you realize that there's a that's not the bittul that's being looked for over here?
I don't know. I think with age, people are less inhibited.
Because I think what's interesting, I'm not looking to drive you crazy, but what was interesting to me, I had a similar conversation the other day, with this guy who grew up in Bedford and Dean. He was an orphan, accepted. He'll be on the podcast either before your episode or after. But an orphan from Washington, D.C., comes to Bedford and Dean for 10 years, goes every year for his birthday to Yechidus, but never becomes a Lubavitcher. He became a Frum Yid. But it was always like, the Rebbe's in charge of this organization, and he's like the head rabbi here, and he's a very special man, clearly, and he does moifsim and things I don't understand. But I'm not, And I realized that, they say about art, for example, that you could take the most beautiful painting, and if you don't give it the right frame, people will walk by it and not pay attention to it. You could take the most beautiful music, and if you play it in the subway, they did this experiment once. I don't know if you know, they did this experiment where they took the world's top violinist and had him play in the subway of Washington City, and they videoed it, and nobody stopped for him. It's like people pay thousands of dollars to listen to this guy, and when you don't know it's you don't. I say that because a lot of times there's this idea, like you said earlier about your father, that he walked into the Friediker Rebbe and the eyes, he wanted to run out. But there's also this thing where some people walk into the Rebbe and you're 12, 13 years old, bar mitzvah, you're able to talk, right? As you get older, a lot of it is based on the context and your understanding of what you're seeing in front of you. We have this impression of, you saw the Rebbe and immediately uplifted, immediately moved. And not everybody, right? Right? It has a lot to do with what's going on inside of you. Right? It's not like you saw the Rebbe and something happened to you automatically. So I think that's what I'm getting at with these questions of as you get older, what happened that suddenly it's more, there's more yira or pachad in front of the Rebbe? Is it that the Rebbe changed, or is it that you understood more about who you're standing? You said you learned Chassidus. What does learning Chassidus have to do with being shy in front of the Rebbe? What does one thing have to do with the other? Because you're learning about what this represents, right?
Correct.
And maybe as you get older, older, you realize that the mannerisms of shyness or the mannerisms of bittul are less important than telling the Rebbe that this is who this person is, because actually it's better that the Rebbe knows.
Again, I'm saying this now.
I understand.
Today I would tell the Rebbe that she makes the cholent, because maybe it would give the Rebbe a certain, or give the lady some special feeling that.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's the real bittul, right? So it's very interesting. Like it has a lot to do with what's going on inside of our own minds.
Correct.
Right. Which is important because, especially in a post Gimel Tammuz time, a lot of times it's like, well, if the Rebbe was here, X, Y, Z. If only I was there in the Yuds or the Chafs. Saying not really. Maybe to some extent, of course, but it depended where you were at then too. Very interesting. Very interesting. So you're talking about Yechidus. You're beginning to come into the world of Lubavitch more and more, and then you eventually leave home and come to Morristown. What's that like?
It was definitely a major change. Just the environment, and you get a little bit of mashke here and there, and sitting by Farbrengens, by Mashvi. I happened to enjoy Melech Tzvibel's Farbrengens very, very much.
Who didn't enjoy them? There are people that
no, his shiurim I didn't appreciate as much as his Farbrengens, for example. His Farbrengens I enjoyed.
Shiurim are very dense, right?
It just, for whatever reason, I identified much more with his Farbrengens than with his shiurim.
Was that in general you enjoyed the room of Chassidus and the learning of Chassidus?
No,
with him?
It was just his mannerism by Farbrengen was very special. And I enjoyed Shmulik Heber was then giving me shiurim.
Yeah.
First year I enjoyed very much. I could say that I could give him credit for my enjoying to learn. He gave me a
Geschmack
in learning, no question about it. And I enjoyed also the Mivtzoyim aspect in Morristown and then later on in New York.
Why did you choose to go to Morristown? That was only yeshiva?
I think Rabbi Fegelstock suggested us.
Were there other yeshivas?
Were there other yeshivas then to choose from? Back in 1973.
Montreal didn't have yeshiva.
Montreal did.
Oh, did have yeshiva.
Yeah, but I think Rabbi Fegelstock wanted us to go away from home.
I see.
To be fully immersed 24/7.
Right.
So a bunch of us went. We actually didn't even sign up. For 2 days we had to go back to New York till they signed us up because we just went. We showed up and then we officially got registered.
Different time.
It was a different time. And then, of course, we were exposed much more to the Rebbe's Farbrengens.
Come in once a month or something.
Come in, and any special event, and I got my place for Farbrengen, which I had. I had one place from when I started for 3 years, and then I changed my place. I got a different place for Farbrengen, but that was that. So I was not on shlichus as a bochur, like my yeshiva. Some of the boys went to Seattle. I didn't go. And I stayed in Chayve Torah and then 770. But from when I...
In those days, some bochur would be selected to go on shlichus, right?
Correct.
Was that like a hard thing to not be sent?
It was hard because they split me and my best friend, Abba Promoter.
Oh, he's your friend?
So that was like he was shocked.
Where did he go? To Seattle?
Seattle. So we grew up, we went to kindergarten together. Actually, it was the Merkas HaTorah.
He's from Montreal.
He's also a Montreal boy. So we went to school together.
He's like a brother.
Like a brother. And we learned smicha together. We did everything together. So when they split us up, so he asked Rabbi Klein, what's with Rafi Tennenhaus? He says he's not on the list. So like Abba punched the wall and he says, I'm sorry, it's not my department. So whatever it is.
How did it work? The Rebbe was selecting?
I don't know how it worked.
I'm saying, did it feel like a punch in the gut that you weren't good enough?
No, it wasn't that. It was the fact that my best friend and I were being separated. That was harsh. It was harsh.
Sure.
But, from every nisayon, you first of all, I was by the Rebbe. And I started to utilize whatever talent I had to get. I was close to Rebbe Dovid Raskin.
Sure.
And when the Rebbe would come out with a campaign, I would be involved very much with helping to implement the campaign.
Right.
Whether it was the Yud Beis Psukim, or I was like the first brochure for the Yud Beis Psukim I put together.
Your talent was the organization, was the arts? What was
a little bit of creativity and promotion. Creativity and promotion. So I would be involved from, let's say, finished Morristown 75. So like say from 76 through 1980, many of the campaigns which the Rebbe started then, they had to be implemented. So tzach would be, there wasn't anyone else in town. It was before there was Tzivus Hashem. It was before there was the Shluchim office.
So how was Yud Beis Pesukim implemented? What did that...
We started off with a little flyer.
Right.
And I wrote the words.
But how did it start? I said
there was two different occasions, 6 psukim, and then one was Blank Boimer. I can't remember the sequence. But once there was 12 psukim, we made a little flyer. It was through tzach. And I remember I wrote the words, be wise, memorize, win a prize. That was, And then the Rebbe spoke to the women. We were upstairs, 770, the Rebbe was speaking to the women. And the Rebbe said that now it's time to make it in a special booklet, like to take it to a new level. And that's when they got the artist, Muchnik, drew the pictures.
Right.
So it was in 76. So
what did it feel like in those days? Like this idea that the Rebbe has an idea and you execute on it. Was there a sense of like history in the making? Or was it just a matter of fact? Like this is what needs to be done?
No feeling of history whatsoever. I had no feeling of history. I just know that because I didn't go on shlichus as a bochur, I wanted to do as much as I could for the Rebbe.
Right.
So I hooked up with mainly Dovid Raskin, who appreciated my efforts.
Right.
And those years, when I was in Kollel, there were two big things that happened. In 1980, there was the Rebbe spoke with Chodesh Nisan about making a big tumult with kids for Pesach.
Right.
And right after Farbrengen, we had a meeting, and for some reason, I said, let's make a picture of a kid hitting what looks like a baseball, but it'll be a matzah ball, and let's start the matzah ball contest. So I thought of that, and this thing took off like wildfire because Hillel David Krinsky, I think, printed 250,000 copies. It went through all the tri-state areas, the Reform, conservative temples, a contest for kids to do maybe 16 items before Pesach, because the Rebbe said to make a big tumult with the kids. We called it
for that Pesach.
Yeah, but the Rebbe was storming. He kept on talking about it, and what happened was that we put it in the Jewish press, the Jewish Week, full-page ads and everything, and they ended up with 53,000 children signing up for this. And Rachmil Ben Yomitzin will tell you that this is what helped Tzivus Hashem get started.
The idea, it was the germs.
Just getting the names. They had names of 53,000 kids with their addresses.
Huh.
And these kids automatically, a few months later, Tzivus Hashem started. But that matzah ball contest was like, there never was such a campaign, that 53,000 plus kids took off. It got, inscribed with kids from Williamsburg, kids from Chassidish neighborhoods, kids from Reform, Talmud Torahs. So I felt very connected that I was involved with these big campaigns. Then that year was the first year for...
Yeah, but you could feel connected to the Rebbe learning his mimer, for example. So it wasn't just a sense of I'm connected to the Rebbe or I'm part of his team, or was it like a sense of this is leading to something big? I don't know.
It just was. We knew how important Hafotza was to the Rebbe. Like we just knew that this was like Hamaisa Hu Iker. So as much as you're going to learn, by the Rebbe, there always was the Hamaisa Hu Iker. So I had that opportunity. It was like sort of like a vacancy there. There was nobody sitting in Tzach doing this, and I just volunteered, and there was others. I wasn't the only one, but it just so happened that when the Rebbe made the campaign that everyone should, even babies, should come to the Aseret Dibros,
Shlichus, yeah.
So I remember writing up the ad for the newspaper, coming soon to a synagogue near you, the 10 Commandments. Similar to when Lahavdala...
No, but people also listening maybe don't fully realize like how innovative that was back then. Like today, it's like, yeah, it feels like a typical Chabad house for sure. But in those days, the idea of Bechal talking about Yiddishkeit in like this kind of marketing terms was less common.
I felt sort of compensating that I wasn't on shlichus, and I just felt that
I
I
guess
was
what,
accomplishing something for the Rebbe. I just felt that I was.
right. No, look, it sounds very much like your father, very down to earth, right? But I guess what I'm driving at is something that I think about is that, like, Lubavitch, on one hand, talks about massive things. Right? Shlichus is to dir b'tachtenim, bring Mashiach, and almost force the Eibishter's hand, give him no choice. Like, these are massive cosmic ideas, right? And then there's the action that comes along with it, which on some levels, okay, what's this like? This is bring Mashiach, a campaign for kids, right? But we try to sometimes infuse these actions, or like we want our kids, we want our bochurim to feel that this mitzvah is going to do it all. It's going to accomplish, the whole thing. And in a way, like the way you're describing it is a lot more down to earth and practical, and to me feels a lot more healthy and also sustainable, right? The idea that, like, also in history in general, most of the time that people are making history, not all the time necessarily, but a lot of the time people don't realize that they're making history. They're just doing something that they feel is the right thing to do right now, and history will judge. That's the whole point, right? We don't know yet where it's going to go, but sometimes I feel like we want to over infuse. You know what I'm saying? Like we want our bochurim to feel that this is going to do X, Y, Z. This is going to, and it's like, where did that come from? What you're describing it wasn't like that. The Rebbe said to do something. I knew therefore that it was the right thing to do, and I did to the best of my ability. Right?
So Beina's Storim,
Right.
I didn't do this during Seder,
Right.
but Beina's Storim, I had an extra moment. I would go downstairs in Tzach, and I would help
Right.
implement the most recent campaign that the Rebbe started.
Right, but you see what I'm saying? That it wasn't from the way you're describing it to me. It doesn't have that whole narrative that has been created around it. Like today, there'll be an article in a magazine talking about the heroics of the bochurim who did the mitzvah tanks, or the heroics of the bochurim that did this mitzvah, or I could see a whole spread. Maybe it's probably been written already. The heroism or the heroics of the bochurim who came up with the matzo ball campaign, the matzo ball competition. I could see like a whole story being made out of it. And the way you're describing it in your recollection it wasn't like that. It was something, right? It was down to.
The Rebbe spoke forcefully.
Did you lose sleep doing it?
I probably stayed up very late at night.
But did you feel like the world is hanging on a thread here? No.
But I wanted to help.
Right.
I just wanted to help the Meiser Huayike, the campaign that the Rebbe was spearheading. So I felt privileged that, Rebbe Dovid Raskin would call upon me to
Right.
help implement.
No, I think it's very healthy, like, to approach it this way. I think a lot of times we've overly romanticized how things were, and because it leads me to the next thing I want to talk to you about is, when you decided to go on shlichus. When did you decide to go on shlichus? Was it when you realized that you were good at it? Was it, your bar mitzvah yechidus? When
Probably in my teenage years. Probably after my bar mitzvah.
Why?
In my high school years. I just felt that this is the key to what I could accomplish in the world.
So it was before you went on
Before I went to Morristown. I did already Mitzrayim when I was a teenager.
So
you were a kid.
You were good at it, and you realized I could do well at this.
I was good at it. My brother Oliver Shalom was good at it. He trained me a little bit.
Your older brother.
My older brother. He took me to McGill University in 1967 when I was 10 years old.
What's Pshat McGill University?
There's a university in Montreal called McGill.
I think it's in McGill University.
No, McGill.
Yeah, sure. I've heard of McGill.
We went to the students and we asked them to put on tefillin, after the 6-Day War. And he would say, in that time, the 60s were radical times. So a student would tell my brother, I don't believe in God. Why should I put on tefillin?
Right.
And my brother would tell him, tomorrow let's talk about God. Today, let's talk about tefillin. Let's put on. If we talk about God, by the time the conversation is over, it's going to be after sunset, and it's too late to put on tefillin.
Right.
So let's do the mitzvah now. So I had already some training.
The tricks,
and I enjoyed it. And I felt that this is the most important thing to do, is to be a shliach. That's how I felt.
Right. Okay.
But, many years later, we started a teacher seminary here. And day one, I told the students, if you become shluchim or if you don't become shluchim, you're equally important to the Rebbe. I never wanted to sort of put the shluchim's kids, or if you're going to become a shliach, you're this category vis-a-vis you're that category. From day one, when the seminary started, I would tell the students in the seminary that in the Rebbe's eyes, whether you're a formal shliach or you're not a formal shliach, you're extremely precious.
Where did you get that from, or what were you pushing against?
I just felt that there was something where there was too much status for you're a shliach or you're not a shliach. I just felt that wasn't healthy.
This is when, in the MEMS?
The seminary we started a year after 9/11.
So after Gimel Thomas. Well,
correct.
Yeah, well, shluchim did become, there was an explosion.
But I just didn't want that when we educate students in our seminary, there should be a feeling of first class and second class. I wanted them all to feel first class.
So you didn't feel that when you went on shlichus, you didn't feel
No, I didn't feel that I'm a shliach and my friend isn't a shliach. I didn't feel that I'm superior.
What did you feel when you became a shliach? What did you feel?
Humbled.
Humbled.
Very humbled.
Was it hard to get the job?
It wasn't hard to get the job. People were surprised that I came here. Florida was having many difficulties when I came.
Right.
And people were surprised that I came.
Economic
and it wasn't such a peaceful atmosphere here when I came. People were surprised that I came. I was naive. Something opened up, and Rabbi Biston was involved, and Rabbi Korf was involved, and there was a balabos who was involved. And I just took it. I didn't think much. I had very little. I know some of my friends were busy with salaries and busy with long-term. I wasn't thinking long-term whatsoever.
Back then already, people were thinking about these things.
People wanted much more money, and they wanted more
money from
guarantee.
Who?
If they were to go on to shlichus, certain guys who didn't go. I know some of my friends, they told the Rebbe that they have an option to go on shlichus, or they could go with their fathers or father-in-laws in business. Anyone who asked that, the Rebbe would say, go to business.
Really?
I have friends like that. Once you showed any natiya to business, the Rebbe would say, take it. Like I saw this with some of my colleagues.
Interesting.
But I was humbled, and I didn't care. Like, my wife wanted to be near her mother, so we were a half hour. Today, there's much more traffic.
How do you interpret that? Once I want to double click on that. How do you interpret that? Is that the Rebbe feels you're not dedicated enough, or it's a simpler kind of psychological thing that if you're not committed, you're not going to be able to deal with the hardships that come with this choice? Was it like, you don't deserve to be on my team if you're not ready to give it all, like to make that sacrifice up front?
Explain. I don't understand your question.
The thing, what you just said about if someone even expressed an option of business, the Rebbe said, was it because because there were stories earlier, the early years of Rabbi Chalikov, that if you even said you have to ask your wife, you're out.
Correct.
And that seems a lot more like, if you're not 100% committed and you're not over the top committed, we're not taking you. But is it that, or is it just, I know that if you're ready now, waffling, there's no way you're going to put up with...
It's very hard for me to interpret
okay.
the Rebbe's, I just noticed this fact.
You didn't read into it.
I didn't read into it. I just noticed that fact.
That's for my generation to come up with this.
No.
To come up with these
it's not for me
pontifications.
to interpret.
Okay. That's for us to do. Yeah. Some of us. Very interesting. So you go on shlichus, and you said that you felt you felt humbled by it. Why? Because you felt that the job was too big. Well, humbled by what?
Humbled to be the Rebbe shliach, because the Rebbe spoke a lot about shliach shalom k'moisei.
Right.
And the Rebbe spoke so much about the importance of shlichus, and I was there by Rosh Chodesh Kislev. I think more shluchim started to go after Chodesh Kislev. It became more popular to go on shlichus. That's my...
Rosh Chodesh Kislev Lamed Ches.
Correct. I was then, in my prime years in 770.
You remember that?
Oh, very, very well. I was there the whole night. I stayed the whole night in 770, the night of the heart attack.
Well, what did people think? What did people think was going on at that time? What did you think? What did you think?
First of all, I didn't believe that anything happened when it happened. I stayed for the last hakafah.
Why do you not believe? Because
I didn't.
Shock?
I just didn't believe it. I saw the Rebbe from the distance. I didn't have such a close place.
Right.
I was like on the, near the Weiberstuhl, the grandstands. But I saw the Rebbe stand, and then I saw the Rebbe dance the seventh kafir. Then I saw the Rebbe go into the sukkah. So I just didn't believe it was
couldn't
that
be as
serious.
bad as you're saying,
I saw it. I just couldn't believe it. And most people went home. Most people went home. The Rebbe said to go home. And when I came back to say to him, why was I up the whole night? Not because I'm such a big chassid. I was up most of Hoshana Rabbah. I davened early Hoshana Rabbah morning. I went to sleep. So I slept most of the day.
Right.
And then this happened. So I went back to 770 after I ate Sudas Yontif. And there were people saying to him, I remember Rabbi Gerari was telling people, why are you talking? He probably knew more than most of us.
Right.
The matzav, we didn't know. And he was saying, why are you talking? Say to him. But it wasn't a big crowd. There was not a big crowd.
There wasn't that sense of urgency yet.
It wasn't. It wasn't a big crowd saying Tillim that night. And then I was going upstairs. You still could go upstairs. And Rabbi Groner asked me to sit by the door going from upstairs to downstairs so it shouldn't be a tumult coming in and out. So I stayed the whole night by the door where the Rebbe would go downstairs, from the hallway.
Or the stairs by the elevator?
No, the stairs by the hallway where the Rebbe would walk down to go down to outside of the base of Medrash. There's a staircase.
All right, the one that everyone uses now.
Correct.
Yeah, so
that's where I
sat. Oh, no, I meant the elevator downstairs. Okay.
Right. So that's where I stayed the whole... And then I heard things were going on. I saw doctors come in, but I didn't know too much.
So when did it start dawning on you that this is serious?
When you saw the empty chair that by davening.
The next morning?
Next morning, you saw the empty chair. That's when it the first time you felt...
It's real.
Correct. You saw that empty chair. But that, again, I think after Chodesh Kislev, and that was very exciting to be part of that, to live through it, I think that it became more popular to start going on shlichus. The love for the Rebbe. When the Rebbe was missing for 5 weeks or 6 weeks.
You almost lost him.
So again, the feeling, the love was so strong for the Rebbe. There was a lot of talk. When we would Farbrengen those days, the Farbrengens were all about shlichus.
But you had already decided to go on shlichus before
Correct,
this.
But not everyone did. But there was a lot of discussion then about the importance of shlichus. There was those days, and I think after Chodesh Kislev, more people than usual started to go on shlichus.
So people started taking the Rebbe more seriously, is what it sounds like.
I just think that it was the love for the Rebbe took on a new dimension after Chodesh Kislev.
Do you think a similar thing happened after Gimel Tammuz? The explosion of shlichus?
I think it's very hard to understand the explosion. Very hard. And it's mind-boggling what has happened. It's totally off the charts. And people just want to connect. And they want to connect any which way they can. And many people have chosen the path of shlichus, which is obviously very enriching and awarding.
Yeah, but you're saying you were saying about Chodesh Kislev that people realized. It sounds like that for many years, because I was talking about shlichus for 20 years before this, but it was more optional. It was more like it's. Some people took it very seriously, but a lot of people took it as right?
This is just my viewpoint. I've said this by Farbrengens. I've shared this with colleagues and with my community, but I just felt that after Rosh Chodesh Kislev, there was a certain tenuah, there was a certain vibe that we got to take it more seriously, and we got to.
It makes a lot of sense. If God forbid a family suffers a health scare, and a parent or a child. You're worried about their health. I'm a father of 4 children, thank God. And even if they have a fever, or they're at home and everything's fine, the day after their fever goes, you feel a certain love for them, or like a caring for them that you took for granted before. Right, it comes to the surface. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? That. There was that scare, and people realized how severe the Rebbe's condition was, and I think people who were on it, I think everybody deep down knew that it was touch and go, like it was a miracle at the end of the day. And after that you don't take it for granted anymore, right? I mean, it's not a stretch to make the connection
Correct.
you're making here. And so that's why so first of all, it's a very interesting way of thinking about because I think there's a much more. I mean, I know that I'm guilty of it. A more cynical take of like what happened after Lamed Ches, or I don't know. It's not. It is more cynical in the sense I think like people realized that this isn't going to last forever, and there was like this kind of denial that started happening there. But I don't want to pull you into my cynical spaces. I like your interpretation.
I'm not a cynical guy.
I like your I like your interpretation. I don't like being cynical either, believe it or not. But I'm saying there are like you could start going into like these other psychologies, whatever. But this is I like this a lot. Like people realize that they realize the gift that they had all along, that they maybe taken a little bit for granted, right? I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, and let's take this seriously, right?
It's like the Chiba Yisera. You got
Right.
suddenly a special endearment and love for the Rebbe that sort of was a result of what had happened.
But you're saying that interpretation doesn't really explain after Gimel Tammuz, because Gimel Tammuz could be in some ways the opposite, right? You lose it, and you lose it, and in a way it could have gone the other way,
My only interpretation,
right?
and again, it's just an interpretation.
Sure.
That after Gimel Tammuz, that you're connected totally to the etzem of the Rebbe.
Right.
There's no Giluyim right now. You don't have any of the Giluyim.
Right.
In Chassidic terminology, we talk about the Gilui and the etzem. After Gimel Tammuz, every Chassid is tapping into the etzem, whether it's the Rebbe's Torah, the Rebbe's...
What does it mean to you, though, in your terminology? What does Gilui mean in your terminology?
Well, Giluyim, we had Farbrengens, we had the Rebbe, we saw the Rebbe, we had dollars, we had interaction face to face.
Right.
Everything was, there was a non-stop Giluyim we had
Right.
before Chav Zayin Oder, and then there was, that was a difficult kufa from Chav Zayin Oder Rishon till Gimel Tammuz, the 2.5 years. But after Gimel Tammuz, you want to connect to the Rebbe, there's no Giluyim here. There's etzem, and Chassidus does speak of how.
But what do you mean by that in English? What do you mean by that? What does etzem mean?
Like it says in Hayom Yom.
Or in Latin, if you want to say it in Latin.
Like it says in Hayom Yom, you want to connect to the Rebbe. It's not just seeing him; it's learning his Torah. So the bochur today, and I have grandchildren, Baruch Hashem, they're learning well in yeshiva. They're learning incredibly well, and to see this happen after Gimel Tammuz, that they have a love for the Rebbe and that they have a koch in the Rebbe's Torah, and in the Miftzayim, this shows that their connection is very essential. It's not external, because even sitting by the Rebbe's Farbrengen before Chav Zayin Oder Rishon, there was an external aspect to it.
Right.
Here, it's not external.
Right.
This is very deep and very essential.
I see. Not superficial.
And that's how I view post Gimel Tammuz, that it's a connection to the essence of the Rebbe.
Did you at all see how your father reacted to Chav Zayin Oder? He
was already sick.
See, it wasn't.
My father was sick for 9 years, so
Okay.
he
wasn't in a place.
He wasn't in a place that he. But I know that when the Simchas Torah heart attack, I know my father was saying Tillim every day, like after the heart attack.
Right.
So, but then he already got sick.
So I want to bring this full circle before we wrap this up. We started off with you mentioning how we were discussing how your shlichus has taken on a very different shape of recent years, and actually, one of the people who told me I should reach out to you, he said, "Look, one thing about the shliach is he constantly reinvents himself, right?" And also on the podcast when I had Rabbi Andruzi and I had Penny Andruzi on, he told me, "Look, I give Rabbi Tennenhaus all the credit because no one else saw shliach material in me, and he did, and he let me be me and saw." So what do you ascribe that flexibility to, or what's the philosophy behind that flexibility? Do you see it as a philosophy? Is it something you think about, or is it just natural?
Well, we've gone to, I've heard of Moshe Feller, he should live long and be well. He often spoke at the kinnis, and he said that you always have to be ready to be flexible in shlichus. And he used to say that you have to be ready. And I tell this to a lot of young guys, that you're going on shlichus, you think you're going for one thing, I'm telling you, in a year from now, you're going to see you're going for something else. Right. So I went on shlichus thinking I'm going to be a rabbi in a shul. That's what I thought. And then little did I realize how I would be involved in many different areas of shlichus, and how there'd be like a few dozen shluchim in Chabad Houses Broward that under our headquarters, as they call it.
But where does it come from? Does it come from something? Is it something that you think about? Is it something that
No, I don't think about it. I think
because you know that it's not natural for a lot of people. A lot of shluchim struggle with this.
Correct.
And I'm not trying to bash anybody. It's hard.
I have to tell you, I think I once got a bracha in Yechidus. The Rebbe told me to be b'simcha. And the Rebbe told me it shouldn't be an external simcha, it should be an internal simcha. And it was something that I had written about, and I live with that Yechidus. And I think when you're b'simcha, which I wake up every morning very happy. My mother told me when I was a baby, I never cried. I was always happy as a little infant.
So why did you need the bracha?
The Rebbe gave me, for whatever reason, that bracha.
So it wasn't. So you it was something that you put effort into, or you feel like he actually transformed the way.
I think he helped me transform.
Uh-huh.
And I was struggling with something, and I asked the Rebbe. The Rebbe told me to be b'simcha, and if I'm b'simcha, then other people will be b'simcha, and not a gemachte simcha, but an innerliche simcha. It was a very powerful yechidus, and I think that I have quite a bit of joie de vivre.
Uh-huh.
Like I told you, I wake up in the morning, I feel it's my first day on shlichus, and I think that helps just balancing all the different Chabad houses and all the different pa'ulis, and every few years we come up with something very big. I mean, we started the whole lighting menorah at the football stadium. That was my idea in 1987, and that just blew away. Like 20,000 Jews were there.
And a lot of Lubavitchers also who thought you were crazy, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bought 26 tickets to all our helpers of that day. And it wasn't just Lubavitchers. There's a guy in Hollywood, a doctor. He was there, not religious, and he didn't even realize it was Chanukah. And today he learns Chassidus every day, and he goes with his tzitzis out to work. But he didn't even, he said, what are they doing? And we went overtime. And we were given 5 minutes. And we probably went 10 minutes overtime, and we were told we're going to be charged $5,000 a minute by the NFL if we go overtime.
This was the Chanukah game.
Chanukah was an ESPN Sunday night game.
This is the one where the Rebbe told to make an invitation.
I asked Penny to take the bottle for me because I was in Shabbos.
So the Rebbe told him to invite everyone.
That's right.
That one.
So that was the breakthrough where we started to reach millions of people through Chanukah.
What did it feel like to get the Rebbe's kind of support, public support like that of upbringing? I'm sure you heard about it right after Shabbos.
I know that Rabbi Korf told me that Rabbi Groner called the morning after the game to ask how it went.
Yeah, but you knew from the way the Rebbe spoke to Penny at the upbringing.
That was before. That was the day before. That was Shabbos before. The game was Sunday night.
Right.
So, again, we wanted to give the Rebbe a big nachas ruach, and we wanted to do Miftzah Chanukah with a big storm, with a very big storm.
But I'm sure you had a little bit of hesitation. Is this the right thing or not the right?
No, I had zero hesitation.
Oh, zero, okay.
Zero. And they put it as part of the schedule. This was part of the game. Both teams were on the field.
You weren't masupik if this is appropriate or not?
Not at all.
Okay.
And we put up signs all over the stadium, like NFL Night of the Festival of Lights. And
so you weren't worried that the Rebbe was going to say no at some point?
Not at all.
I see.
No, we wrote the Rebbe before.
Okay.
We were all
right.
And both teams were on the field when this happened. And Shnei Zalman Baumgarten was singing, and I met a doctor like 25 years later, and he says, were you the one who was speaking at the Chanukah? He says, I want to tell you how I felt. He says, if you ever have a son who's bar mitzvah and you're waiting for that Haftorah to be over, that's how I was feeling. So I came to a football game. I didn't come for this stuff. They were shocked. Because in those days, everyone came on time. Right. There was 70,000 people in the stands, and we did go overtime. And somebody told me that Joe Robbie, who was then the owner, actually paid the $50,000 fee.
Oh, you went 10 minutes overtime?
We did go 10 minutes overtime.
10 minutes overtime?
Yeah, with the singing and with the talking. And, once you get the mic in front of 70,000 people, I was talking about Hakel. It was a year of Hakel, Tafshim Memches. It was Hakel. I kept on going. And the game started late. So in South America, they saw it on TV because they weren't doing commercials. But here, there was commercials while it was going on. You could hear in the background some singing. But we never got that clip. We tried to get the clip because there was a blimp going over the stadium. We never got the clip, but it encouraged, obviously, from then on. You see all over the world, people are doing this by sporting events. And every year we do a major Hanukkah event, which brings together Jews from all walks of life. And I feel very fortunate. The Rebbe gave me a bracha for this Hanukkah festival that we do every year, that it should grow every year, just like the menorah grows each night. So I feel humbled, and I feel I'm hoping to give the Rebbe some nachas.
Beautiful. So you said the story you said before about the Rebbe giving you a bracha to be happy, or to find simcha. I don't know if the word happy. People have a shaila if that's what simcha means. But there's a yom I think, where I think one of the Rebbeim said that the Shpal Zayda said that the Rebbe touched me on my heart.
I think it's Tezayin Tevis. I think that's the.
But who said it? Shpal Zayda said that Baal Shem Tov touched my heart, and since then it's been warm.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of that story where clearly the Rebbe touched you with that bracha, and I could feel the warmth when you said it to me, and I could feel the warmth in this conversation. And it's been a pleasure sitting with you, and thank you again for making the time in the middle of trying to figure out how to sell the chametz. It's a busy time of year, but I think a lot of people are going to very much enjoy this conversation and find something to be inspired by, and the story of your father and your story and everything. And so thank you very much. Kosher Freilich and Pesach.
Thank you. Kosher Freilich and Pesach. And you should be matzliach with this podcast. Le'elu or le'ela.
Thank you, sir.
And it's a chelik of afotis amayonis.
Thank you, sir. It might be.
It is.
I'm just
no suffix.
I'm just doing something that I feel is good for myself and for others. And to all those listening, Kosher Freilich and Pesach. Thank you.
Thank you.
The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentant Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.